You're listening to the Inbound Logistics Podcast with today's guest, Troy Ryley, President of ECHO Mexico. Setting up supply chain operations in Mexico has challenges ranging from customs to climate, but with the benefits of a shorter supply chain, a growing infrastructure, and talented labor, is it ultimately worth the effort? Troy Ryley, President of ECHO Mexico, goes into the many benefits of nearshoring, as well as the importance of working with the right partner to navigate the often complex and potentially rewarding supply chain scenarios. Joining us today on the Inbound Logistics Podcast from ECHO Global Logistics, we have Troy Ryley, President of ECHO Mexico. Troy, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Pleasure to be on with you guys.
It's great to have you. Looking forward to our conversation. Troy, if I can ask you a favor, could you introduce yourself to our audience and give us a little bit about your background and what you're currently doing with ECHO Mexico today?
Sure, thank you. Well, again, Troy Ryley. I'm the president for the Mexico division for ECHO. I started with the company early this year, actually, with the objective of really building out our full infrastructure cross-border. I've been in the market working with different companies, both Fortune 500 and global companies, for almost 30 years. I actually, almost embarrassed to say this, started working in Mexico even before NAFTA was signed. So 1993, 1994, about that time period. So I've obviously seen a tremendous amount of change. I watched a lot of different development of different aspects of logistics in and out of Mexico during that time frame. I look forward to sharing that during this interview.
Excellent. Yes, looking forward to it. We're going to be talking about nearshoring today. It's a supply chain feature that we at Inbound Logistics Magazine do focus on quite a bit. We know that from a recent Kearney report that in 2023, for the first time in a decade, Mexico surpassed China as the largest exporter to the United States. And between 2019 and 2023, U.S. imports of Mexican manufactured goods jumped by nearly a third to $422 billion. So we know that companies that look to sell into the U.S. market and establish some operations in Mexico, either in whole or in part, often gain shorter, more flexible supply chains, and then a talented labor pool as well. In terms of those nearshoring efforts, what are some of the factors driving Mexico's current growth?
You know, if you look at historically, things are changing very dynamically in the global markets. You know, if we went all the way back to World War II, Bretton Woods, which was the organization or kind of the first meeting of all the world powers after the war had ended, the U.S. basically stepped up and said, hey, we're going to be the global police force for free trade. We're going to make sure that the waterways are clear, that there's not a problem. Any of our allies that want to trade back and forth, we're going to ensure that that occurs without any major issues. The world has changed quite a bit. There's a lot more instability in global waterways. I think the U.S. is less apt to protect all and any waterway across the all oceans. And we're seeing things happen in China, like the Chinese dumping rocks in the South China Sea to create islands and infrastructure in areas that are being claimed as their territory. Obviously, threats potentially to Taiwan. So it's creating a global sense of insecurity. And that is driving people closer to regional markets, less to global markets. I mean, I just give that example. If there was ever a problem with Taiwan and you're a manufacturer here in the U.S. and you're tied 100% to imports from China, what would happen to your company and your operation? So I think they're starting to build in these contingency plans, and it's shifting. And the most logical location right now for U.S. markets has been produced in Mexico. And that's why we're seeing such a huge shift. Even the Chinese are moving to the Mexican marketplace because they don't want to be left out. And they're trying to get the foothold to get preferential rates, also to continue to supply goods through Mexico into the United States. So again, I think we're going to see that trend continue. The more stable the world is, the slower that'll happen. The more unstable the world is, the faster we're going to see that type of dynamic in global trade markets.
All right. Now you mentioned infrastructure, and in light of that instability that's kind of bubbling up all over the place, does Mexico have the infrastructure required to support this current growth?
I think it's happened faster than they can keep up with. a lot of the current growth for nearshoring is occurring in the Monterey marketplace, and they've already seen strains on their electrical power, on their water supply, on many, even on their labor supply. Labor rates in the Monterey area have gone up significantly based on the number of companies coming in and the competition for the limited number of employees in that particular market. Companies like Monterey because it's close. You're only a few hours away from the border, so it makes the most sense for an entry strategy for a new company. But I think we're going to see strain on the infrastructure in general in that particular marketplace. You've also seen post-COVID a huge shift in general with just asset-based companies in the United States. When COVID hit, they used a lot of their trailers and equipment in the U.S. markets. Now we're seeing that trend has continued. They're less likely to put trailers into the Mexican marketplace, which means you have Mexican transportation companies that are having to put their equipment in play and allow that equipment to go in the United States to meet this increased demand and the lack of U.S. equipment in the market today. So that, in addition, there's more pressure on road infrastructure. I mean, there's toll roads in play right now, feeding Monterrey, Mexico City, Querétaro, Guadalajara, and you're seeing more and more trucks, more and more damage as the number of units and trailers increase on these limited arteries of transportation that Mexico has in play.
Yeah, it sounds like you've seen a few changes in your time there. Can you take us through the progress of Mexico's logistics over your last few years doing business in this market?
Well, it continues to change very, very quickly. I would say, going way back, and I won't go back too far, the ocean ports weren't used effectively. Manzanillo, I remember when Walmart had first set up in Mexico, I was sent out to look at the port of Manzanillo as a direct access point for Asian goods into Mexico, because prior everything was sent to the port of LA, sent in bond to Laredo, Texas, and then brought into the country. With the new dynamic of the ports, obviously things changed quite a bit. A lot of raw materials started flowing in from Asia direct over ports into Mexico, where it used to travel through, again, the United States and then come up through Laredo. So it's created quite a bit of imbalance in the freight flows to and from the United States and Mexico, which is, again, putting even more strain on how companies and logistics entities need to compensate for this ever-changing dynamic.
All right. It sounds like there are challenges for sure. So what are some of the largest logistics issues that clients face when they think about starting their operations in Mexico then?
There's two things. I think smaller, mid-sized companies, they try to go in and have bids in for their customs, U.S. customs brokerage, Mexican customs brokerage, U.S. trucking to the border, Mexican trucking to the border. It's a very complex scenario. And unless you're a pretty sophisticated company that has a robust logistics division, it's extremely hard to pull that off. And the reason is something goes wrong in your supply chain and it becomes a finger pointing game between all the different players. So you really need to have an integrated supplier, somebody that's capable of doing all these different services for you, for the reason of simplicity, visibility, and accountability to start. But the other thing that you need is contingency planning. If I can tell you, the one constant in Mexico is it's never consistent. Every year is different. Every peak season is either extremely difficult or not so difficult. We had Mexican customs facilities blow down in a storm just several weeks ago. Several years ago, there was a hurricane that hit that wiped out the road to Monterrey. So if you don't have a good logistics partner that understands how to build contingency planning and flexibility into your supply chain to allow you to adjust, you will get caught off guard when these issues will occur. I mean, they are going to occur. and you need to be thinking about this in advance to be successful.
Right. Okay. You mentioned customs. Can you go into that a little bit more and explain why Mexican customs is such an important and complex part of the whole supply chain there in Mexico?
Well, in the United States, our U.S. customs entities basically act as a facilitator of trade, right? They're keeping trade statistics on exports, and they're helping to make sure that goods are classified correctly, and we're screening out any trademark violations and other things on imports. They do a lot more than that, and then obviously the duty and tax collection component of it, they help facilitate that. In Mexico, let me say something. The import of record in the United States is ultimately responsible for the harmonized code classification of the goods that affects its standing as it pertains to duties and taxes. In Mexico, it's a different regimen completely, in the sense that the Mexican government has put Mexican customs brokers in charge of ensuring that these taxes are collected, and not just ensuring the taxes are collected, but that they're classified correctly, the paperwork matches, the actual counts within the trailers of merchandise are accurate, the labeling on the goods is correct. And if it isn't done correctly, they're on the line and on the hook as much as the importer of record is in Mexico. So that's why you see these millions and millions of square feet of facilities in markets like Laredo, Texas, and El Paso, and McAllen, and Otay Mesa. They're grabbing the goods on the U.S. side of the border, ensuring that all the paperwork and product counts and compliance is correct before they're allowing those goods to cross. So it creates an extraordinary amount of complexity to what would be normally a much easier supply chain.
Okay. Well, if we have audience members out there that want to cut through that complexity and find out more information about Echo and your nearshoring efforts, where can I send them?
Well, they can get on our website first at www.echo.com. It's a great place to start. There's some pages on our Mexico offerings and services, plus what we do, obviously, in North America in general as a company.
All right, excellent. And that link will be in the show notes, so you can head right over there to get the information that you need. Troy Ryley, thank you so much for sharing some of that information with us. Best of luck to you down there in Mexico City, and best of luck to Echo.
I would thank you for allowing me to participate.
Inbound Logistics Magazine is the information leader in supply chain and logistics management. Start your free print and digital subscription today by visiting bit.ly/getil. That's bit.ly/get_IL and stay ahead of the 3PL game.
The Inbound Logistics Podcast is a production of Inbound Logistics Magazine. For the most in-depth information around logistics, transportation, and supply chain practices, get your free print and digital subscription at inboundlogistics.com/subscribe. Connect with us via LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube for the most current developments in the industry. If you'd like to leave us some feedback or have a topic you'd like to see covered in a future episode, call our dialogue line at 888-878-3247 or leave us an email at podcast@inboundlogistics.com. I'm your host, Jeff Vita. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time here on the Inbound Logistics Podcast.